As arguably Bleach's most prominent and influential villain, Sosuke Aizen has enjoyed a considerable level of popularity among the Bleach community, particularly here in the West. However, across the wider internet, he's also garnered serious brand recognition. There aren't many anime and manga fans that don't know the name Aizen, even if they're not interested in Bleach, particularly those who were reading manga around the time Bleach was releasing weekly. And you know, as a self-confessed Aizen superfan, it's not hard to see why, at least in my opinion, as the main, most pivotal antagonist of one of the biggest series around for a long time, Aizen's been responsible for some of the most earth-shattering story moments in all of Bleach, and has actually been the architect of much of Bleach's story, seemingly as much as Kubo himself, leading to many industry-wide jokes. And along with the conniving, the planning, the sinisterness of Aizen, it is that kind of meta-level commentary that is also just as responsible for him being so popular a character. And like I said, Aizen has been responsible for so much of what makes Bleach great, stretching right back to the Soul Society arc, wherein we have his earth-shattering betrayal that I know hooked me in as a fan for the long run. After reading it, it changed the game completely for me, seeing Aizen still being alive, having such an impeccably written turn. The end of Soul Society arc is obviously incredible, and Aizen's influence stretches all the way down to the very end of the story, where he aids Ichigo in taking down Yhwach, the final boss of Bleach, with an absolutely sublime illusion that goes down as one of Aizen's top moments of all time. And yet, in my opinion, there is only one Aizen moment I think of when I think of a way to distill down the character to his most purest and most enjoyable form. One scene that has stuck in my head forever, since reading it and being utterly blown away the first time I read it, and one scene that truly exemplifies not only what makes Aizen such a great and popular villain, but also really exemplifies the way Kubo was writing this character. And that's what we're going to discuss in today's video. Before we begin, guys, if you haven't hit subscribe yet, make sure to do that now. You're in the perfect place for Bleach content like this every single week. And also don't forget to give the video a thumbs up as well, because it really does help get it more exposure on YouTube and help it reach more Bleach fans like yourselves. And if you want to help support me a little bit more on the channel, we do have a Patreon as well, where you can get videos like this early, and you can support me there for as little as $1 a month. And of course, to those of you who are already doing that, a massive thank you. So, Aizen, yes, another Aizen video. What can I say? As I said, I am a self-confessed huge fan of this character. There is some serious bias here. But in my opinion, he is impeccably handled throughout almost all of Bleach. There are so many layers to what make this guy so compelling. From the fact that he can seemingly plan everything so far in advance to an absolutely comical degree, to the fact that he is very cool, calm, collected, very sinister at the same time, but there is perhaps an underlying layer of mystique to him as well. In fact, there are many villains in Bleach who have been criticised for their handling in regards to having perhaps no flashback, no real or obvious motivation, but Aizen is an enigma in that regard. I like the fact that we don't know anything about where this guy came from. He just is a very, very powerful Shinigami who wants to essentially overthrow the establishment and replace it with something that is more akin to his liking. He hates the idea of people ruling over him per se, and he wants to change the system from the inside out. And of course, discovering what we find out both in the Thousand-Year Blood War arc and Can't Fear Your Own World, there is also that highly compelling argument that maybe he wasn't entirely in the wrong, although with most people who believe themselves to be good but are in fact doing evil, his methods are very questionable. And you know, there is just so much that fascinates me about Aizen, even just going off of that last sentence. You know, did Aizen really believe himself to be good? I have a hard time thinking that he actually does. He is incredibly clever. And it's not that I think he thinks he's good. The way I see Aizen is I think he just knows that what he is doing is necessary evil to help progress the world. It's quite clear he sees himself as a godlike figure, as I brought up in the Shinji versus Aizen battle that you can check out as well. And that's not something that really comes with being a good person, and I think he's well aware of that. But at the same time, it's almost that it is a little bit, you kind of get the sense a little bit similar to, say, Thanos from the recent Avengers films. If you've seen, I'm sure you probably have, they are absolutely massive after all. He kind of feels like he's the only person who can achieve this goal of his. He's the right man for the job, the right man for the difficult job. That's exactly how I think Aizen probably sees himself. But this is, a huge tangent. An Aizen video is something that I would love to tackle. Like I said, he is my favourite character. And there's just so much more to Aizen that makes him beloved as well. Looking at the kind of meta-level commentary on the character too, the fact that even if you're not an Aizen or even a Bleach fan, you almost certainly know who this guy is. And that's the result of numerous memes and jokes that were born of the character, of his seemingly precognition abilities, the fact that he can plan just about everything, but also his troll-like nature, the way the character would seemingly do something just to mess with the fan base, or at the very least actively mess with the minds of the characters in the series, seemingly coming from the desk of Kubo himself. And that's a big part of this scene we're going to talk about today. So like I mentioned, Aizen is a key player in numerous major scenes in Bleach. The ending of the Soul Society arc, the end of Hypnosis, mini-arc is just balls to the wall, crazy from start to finish, just incredibly well written and really just sets the tone for the rest of the series moving forwards. Aizen's active role in both Turn Back the Pendulum and Everything But the Rain is just wonderfully handled, and like I said, his short but sweet appearance in the 1000-Year Blood War arc is very nice as well. However, the particular scene that we are going to look at today takes place towards the end of the Arrancar arc, just as the final battle against Aizen himself is ramping up. Aizen is an amalgamation of many character tropes: mad scientist, the sort of final boss, godlike character, but also that sort of shadowy marionette, the guy who's in the background pulling all the strings. And now, as we kind of enter volume 45, he is stepping out onto the battlefield for the first time. And this fight is handled pretty well, in my opinion. After the many failures of his Espada, Aizen decides to take matters into his own hands and take on the combined forces of the Gotei 13 and the Vizards on his own. And there's a lot of emotional heft behind this battle, thanks in part to the legwork Kubo puts in with the Turn Back the Pendulum arc just before the final stage begins. And so you know why everyone hates Aizen, especially the Vizards, who have been personally had their lives essentially ruined in many ways by this guy, and now they're here to finally put a stop to him as a united front. It's a lovely moment, and there's a lot of that in this section. Shinji talking with Yamamoto, coming to an agreement that actually they're both on Ichigo's side, on the side of duty and justice, and bringing Aizen down, finally, after years of scheming. And so the emotional heft is there, and it all leads in very nicely to what is, in my opinion, the single greatest Aizen moment. And that, of course, is during this final battle, those combined forces are taking on Aizen. We get probably the best, craziest illusion he pulls off in the entire series, which is when he makes everyone attack Hinamori Momo instead of himself. And so for some context before that earth-shattering moment, the fight begins. Hitsugaya flies in, clashes blades with Aizen, commends him on not using his illusionary Shikai right off the bat, which should immediately ring some alarm bells. That's a nice Chekhov's gun that Kubo positions ready to fire. However, our minds are pretty quickly taken off of Hitsugaya's remark as Kuraku comes in swinging, bounces off a Kido barrier, and then you get other characters like Komamura and Love joining in the fray as well. It's a wonderful fight, absolutely just littered with classic Aizen moments, like when he destroys Komamura's Bankai and says, our very definition of power is completely different, and then wipes it out in like a single hit. Just so many good moments in this fight all round. When Soifon tries to attack him, you Nigeki Kesatsu, and he just completely nullifies her attack. black shadows across his face as he says, my Reiatsu can just crush your pathetic technique. Again, that's just so good. But all of this is leading to one singular moment where it looks like the good guys actually might have gained the upper hand against the main boss of Bleach, essentially. So Aizen moves to attack Soifon, who using a bunch of clones now and flying in towards him, but his hand is suddenly frozen by his side by Hitsugaya. Surprised, Aizen realises he can't move, but before he can do anything else, a massive blade bursts through his chest as Kyoraku rises up behind him, having used Kageoni on the shadow that Aizen is now casting on the ice behind him. Kyoraku also, by the way, looks like a total badass during that scene. And you have to realise as well kind of how crazy this was, reading these chapters. Aizen, remember, as I mentioned again in my battle analysis video, only first took damage on screen during that fight with Shinji. And suddenly he was getting hit all over the place. And that really helped you think that the stakes had been lifted. It really helped you think, actually, we are being thrown headfirst here into what's probably the final fight. Aizen is now completely immobilised, and Hitsugaya readies himself for a final strike, and he rushes Aizen from the front, preparing to stab him through the heart. However, Aizen himself is ready for this and claims that Hitsugaya is way too young, way too inexperienced, and rushing him from the front like that is a very And then he realises Hitsugaya is not in front of him, he's behind him, as he notices Shinji mockingly standing there swinging Sakanade from his finger, having reversed the entire scenario. And as it's too late, Aizen realises Hitsugaya is right there behind him as he gets stabbed straight through the chest. The choreography is great, the teamwork is great, it's a brilliant moment, and for a brief respite, everyone thinks they have won. Down on the ground, the vice captains are looking up in absolute disbelief. Omaida is like, I can't believe this is happening. The captains sweat on their brows, think that the hard fight is actually over already. And of course, we as readers are not quite so easily fooled. It seems very, very unlikely that the big bad of Bleach is down already. Way too easy. And also, you have Ichigo, the main character, standing over in the corner like a lame duck. Surely he is going to have some input on how Aizen is eventually brought down. While these celebrations begin, Aizen's former vice-captain, Hinamori Momo, who was injured earlier in the fight, gets to her feet and begins to mysteriously walk away. No one seems to pay any attention to this apart from Iba and Izuru, who kind of go after her a little bit, wondering what's up. And just when it seems like their worst fears are over and the enemy has been defeated by the combined work of the Gotei and the Vizards, the absolute worst possible outcome happens, and the best Aizen scene of all time that absolutely exemplifies and boils this character down to a single moment takes place. Suddenly, breaking the silence, breaking the peace, Ichigo suddenly screams at them, "What on earth are you doing? What the hell do you guys think you are doing?" And seemingly at the same time as their peace is shattered, so is their world. Their eyes light up in absolute horror as they all realise what they are actually looking at. Rather than having stabbed Aizen through the back, Hitsugaya has actually skewered Hinamori Momo instead, Aizen's former vice-captain. Obviously, Hitsugaya is bug-eyed and aghast at this, barely stammering her name. Shunsui and Soifon look absolutely horrified, but Shinji, knowing what his former vice-captain is up to, but just a bit too late, cottons on and turns to look at Hinamori down on the ground instead, just as she explodes and reveals the real Aizen as he cuts down Izuru and Iba. It is a brutal, cold, callous, sadistic moment that is possibly even totally over the line. I mean, Hinamori did not deserve this. But at the same time, it's so good. It's so good. It totally really just showed you the depths of depravity that Aizen will go to. This is not a man who can consider himself a good person. He has literally taken his vice-captain at some point and put her in the place of himself to be skewered by the captains. which is something we'll get into a bit. But it's just a fantastic moment. As you can see, I've got one of the prime panels from that moment behind me because it has just stood out to me forever as being so good. And Shinji just sort of screams at Aizen like, when? When did you use Kyoka Suigetsu? Calling back to Hitsugaya's earlier remark. And then you get the moment. What I believe to be the greatest Aizen moment of all time. His dialogue as well is just so good. Everything he has, for some reason, everything he says has to be some roundabout thing. And everything he says is just dripping with a sort of mockingness. You know, he is just replying to Shinji in a way that makes Shinji look like a moron, despite the fact he could never have really anticipated this. But Aizen turns to Shinji and he's like, when? What an amusing question. You know, perhaps a better question you should be asking. The screen darkens and we get this wonderful panel of Aizen's just pure evil face. Evil at its most comical, but also best in the series, as he turns to Shinji and he just says, when were you under the illusion that I wasn't using Kyoka Suigetsu? And it's so good. It's so good because Shinji just, is horrified as he realizes they've been tricked the entire time. Hitsugaya commended Aizen for not using his Shikai, but in reality he has been using it presumably all along. It's fantastically well done. And, when you speak of Aizen, this is the scene that really stands out to me because it works on so many levels for this character. His unflinching villainy, his coldness, especially towards someone who you used to think he cared about on some level. And even if you had a flinching doubt in your mind that maybe there was some humanity left in Aizen, that should be gone now. To achieve his goal, he will go to any lengths to do it. It shows you the very best of Kyoka Suigetsu. This is the most insane illusion in the series, in my opinion. Sure, the Soul Society fake Aizen body is better for the plot, but this is the most shocking. And then you get just a wonderful Aizen quote as well. It's such a mocking quote. Just, again, very trolly. This is him completely messing with Shinji's mind, and Kubo taking this chance to kind of laugh at us, the reader, in a very heartfelt way. This moment was so big on the internet back in the day that the original translation, which was when were you under the impression I wasn't using Kyoka Suigetsu, became a meme. Feels like one of the earliest memes around. I remember seeing it on the forums and stuff like that, the old forums now. We're talking about things like One Manga and Bleach Exile. If someone had assumed something and they were wrong, someone would be like, when were you under the impression I had blah, 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 blah. And it all stemmed from this crazy Aizen moment where he basically just middle-fingered everyone in the cast and also the fans as well. And it was really, really good. And I think some people were probably pretty annoyed by this moment because it does sort of feel like, you had no way of really knowing. But I personally really liked it, and I think it just completely exemplifies him as a character. And of course, after this moment, it completely breaks Hitsugaya that he has just nearly murdered his childhood friend, and he lunges at Aizen, and Kyoraku is like, no, again, very nicely using a little Chekhov's gun that Kubo implanted earlier, where Hitsugaya is starting to fly off the handle, and Kyoraku's like, you need to cool down. Hitsugaya has now completely lost it, completely unprepared to fight Aizen in a combat scenario like this, and be completely, completely mentally destroyed by his guile. Hitsugaya leaves everyone wide open, and Aizen takes all of them out in a single blow, essentially. And there was a lovely little flavor text at the time on the end of this chapter where it was like, will he ever fall? And it was like, it really felt actually maybe he won't, because that was just such a crazy moment. Another part as well that I think really adds to this moment is there was this idea floating around back in the day that the vice captains of the traitor captains, so Hisagi, Izuru, and Momo, would have some kind of impact on the way their former captains were eventually defeated. There's a nice moment where Izuru is taking on Abirama, and Gin mentions that he's glad Izuru is doing so well. So that early acknowledgement of their relationship again got people thinking. This was then exemplified again when Hinamori arrives on the battlefield, and there's a slight twinge in Aizen's unflinching attitude, and Gin is like, something wrong? And Aizen's like, no, it's nothing. And, again, you think, maybe, is there something there? Does Aizen still slightly care about the girl that he completely destroyed? Is there something still there, some humanity lingering in him? And for me, at least, this theory was just completely, solidified when Hisagi was the one who killed Tozen. I was like, Kubo is going the route of having all of these guys have some kind of major impact on their former friend, master, whatever you call it, defeat. And so to see Aizen use Hinamori in such a brutal way that completely took her out of the story, until basically the 1,000-Year Blood War arc, was again a huge middle finger to what it felt like, that theory. And Aizen obviously feels absolutely nothing for this character anymore. So I absolutely love the moment. It really endears me on Aizen. I think it's just a really, really well done scene. Great shock value. But there are some questions to be asked, undeniably. There are a lot of questions. And this is one of those Bleach moments where Kubo, you kind of get the impression he was like, it looks cool, so I'm doing it. It's a cool Aizen moment, so I'm doing it. And it's difficult to kind of wrap your head around as to how this moment actually makes sense. So, when does Aizen use Kyoka Suigetsu? Because someone is defeating Komamura, Love, Rose, Lisa, etc. So that must be him. Someone is blocking Nigeki Kesatsu, unless, of course, there is actually no one there at that point, which is possible. Soifon could be basically stabbing thin air. But then it's so difficult because someone must be crushing out her ability, or at least Aizen's making her think that someone is doing that. And then Kyoraku again could be stabbing no one. But during that moment, we can probably assume that Kyoraku hasn't actually stabbed Hinamori, because I feel like with Kyoraku and Hitsugaya, she almost certainly would be dead. So at that point, after Kyoraku has stabbed either Aizen or absolutely nothing, Aizen, has activated Kyoka Suigetsu, decided to go down to the ground, pick up Hinamori, take her back up. See, it is kind of weird when you spell it out like this. Take her back up, plonk her down in front of Hitsugaya, and then go back down to the ground to take the place of Hinamori, get up and walk around, and then eventually attack Izuru and Iba, as everyone realises Hinamori is the one who is being stabbed. And then Hinamori is like the tankiest vice captain in the world, apparently. So the logistics of this moment are, I would argue, questionable at best. There are ways of explaining around it, but even then it's very flimsy, I think. Kyoka Suigetsu can create completely perfect illusions, so it's completely in the realm of possibility that they are not fighting Aizen at all, they are fighting nothing. But even then, the idea of him grabbing Momo, putting her there, then because he then goes down, it is fact that Aizen ends up where Hinamori is and attacks Iba. I'm thinking about it too much. At the end of the day, it's just a really cool moment. And in my opinion, it is Aizen's best scene in the series, because it truly does, when you boil it down, this is who Aizen is. And this is who Kubo wanted you to see him as, particularly during this big final battle. Ruthless, conniving, scheming, cold, uncaring. And again, with a nice little bit of mocking in there as well, of, kind of oozing almost sarcasm when he just absolutely backhands Shinji's comment about, that's an amusing question. Like, you're such a small human to be asking such small questions. You should really be asking, when were you under the illusion that I wasn't using this power? Just really great stuff. And I've always loved that panel. I have a real thing for, you guys know already that I love the bad guys, not just in Bleach, but in basically any series whatsoever. And I love, cheesy evil as well as great. And that is super cheese, but it works really well. The whole evil shadow. Where does that shadow come from? It doesn't matter, because it looks awesome. So yeah, this video really has just been a bit of a fanboy rant, I'll be totally honest with you, but I know Aizen is a very popular character, and I just wanted to discuss this scene so much because I do really love it. So that's it for this video, guys. I really hope you enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments below if you agree with me that this is the best Aizen moment in Bleach, or if perhaps you do prefer his betrayal or his helping out with the fight against Yuha, or something else entirely. Do let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to hit subscribe, guys, and until next time, I'll catch you later. I'll see you then.